thrilled to introduce, if well, that's still everyone knows Matthew Goodwin, right? I mean, Matthew's like world renowned in his work in biometrics and wearables. I had heard of him, and everyone talked so much about how amazing his research was, and then I actually finally got to like hear him speak for the first time at the tech conference that I'd already mentioned that we were at in Qatar, and was like, damn, I can see people are so impressed with Matthew. So his talk that was fantastic. He also spoke at the Thompson Center conference. So I'm here at the Thompson Center now. But we thought, what a great the stuff that he's doing is just so cool and so applicable to kind of what we're trying to do in the real world. That I thought would be a really great talk just to listen to about what they're finding. It combines AI and technology and all kinds of cool stuff with it too. So without further ado, I'm going to turn my camera off. And Matthew, the stage is yours.
Thank you very much, Stephen. This is exactly the kind of group that I want to share this work with because ultimately, I want to put this technology in your hands to support the families that you're working with. It's very cool too to see Sophie on and Ron on and Rachel on. It's been a while since I've seen the three of you, and I love that you're here today. I'm going to try to be as smooth as I can about this. My notes are not showing and it helps me stay on time. So I'm gonna be using two different screens. So please, pardon me if you see me kind of looking off screen. That's what that's about. That's the wrong one. There. Oop, had it and lost it. Try that again. Okay, everybody can see the slides? Okay, thank you.
We're
So
good.
my name is Matthew Goodwin. I'm at Northeastern University in Boston. I am jointly appointed between the College of Public Health and Health Science and College of Computer Science. I'm trained as a behavioral scientist. I've been working in the field of autism for about 30 years. The first 10 of those was in a clinical capacity at a place called the Groden Center in Providence, Rhode Island. We served about 1,000 families a year, and I really would say that decade of like watching maturation in a sample that large taught me just about everything I needed to know. Well, not needed to know, but would form the foundation of my interests, converting clinic into research. And so a lot of what I want to share with you, I kind of get dubbed as a tech person, but actually, those are my friends that are the tech people. I am an applied researcher. I'm interested in uh, translational research, real world data collection. I have a couple kind of background slides to give you a sense of my orientation before I dive into the project I want to share. So my lab is called the Computational Behavioral Science Lab. I joke sometimes that this is like X-Men Academy. I have various different students in computer science and engineering, in human development, and in psychology, and we're essentially interested in leveraging emerging technologies across these fields to better understand, support, and evaluate human development. I take inspiration for this project and a lot of the work that I am um, doing, going back to the kind of core observations from Kanner and Asperger. And it's this fifth one that it's kind of motivated me throughout. This observation of an anxiously obsessive behavior pattern designed to maintain sameness, limiting spontaneity, and leading to rage or panic when external conditions do not meet the individual's demands of the moment. I'll come back to this later, but I like this as kind of like a background setting. Um, I'm sure everybody here knows this, but it's sort of nice to put a point on it. The recent CDC is estimating 1 in 38 children by age 8 meeting criteria for autism. It's 2.7% of the general population, so 78 million people worldwide. Um, of those 78 million, 27% or 21 million are meeting criteria for what the CDC called profound autism. So this is non or minimally verbal, IQ at 50 or below, requiring 24/7 um, supervision to maintain safety. I think everyone here would probably agree with me that the knowledge and treatment options continue to lag for those with profound autism relative to those who are more moderately or mildly affected. That profound designation, that subpopulation within autism is underrepresented in modern large data repositories because I would argue they can't easily comply with laboratory-based research methods where it's the setting that most of us perform our work in. And I always like to give credit to Yuri Bronfenbrenner and his maxim of child development research is often the business of bringing people to strange places with strange people for ill-defined periods of time, doing tasks they've never done before and being expected to act naturally. Um, Something else that kind of motivates this work was the Lancet Commission. So for those who haven't seen this yet, this was 2021. It was an international team of leading autism advocates, researchers, nonprofit foundations, talking about the future care and clinical research in autism. They have more key messages than I have here on the screen, but these are some of the ones that I want to highlight. And I'm going to read through them just because I think it's really important for all of us to kind of anchor in the real world experience of this population. So 78 million people worldwide have autism, but the majority do not receive support from or have access to adequate healthcare, education, and social care services. Children and adults with autism can have happy and healthy lives, but urgent action is required to promote these outcomes. They're often not happening on their own. Autism is heterogeneous and requires personalized evidence-based assessments and interventions that are accessible and affordable to every person that can improve the lives of individuals and their families. A stepped care and personalized health approach to delivering services and monitoring effectiveness across time provides a framework for efficient and equitable distribution of resources to improve outcomes. And finally, research that results in immediate improvements in the lives of people with autism and their families should be prioritized. So my sort of version, it's not that I think anybody here and anybody in the field at large would disagree with any of those statements. It's very difficult, though, when we are primarily doing research in labs or we're doing um, survey, primarily behavior collection or brief clinical encounters. So I sort of gravitated towards trying to think about what we could do with video and audio and wearable sensors. Early in my doctoral work, I was learning about the subdisciplines of computer science in ubiquitous computing and wearable computing, and started to kind of hang out with those folks and see what they could do. They're, mostly focused on defense and logistics and marketing and sales, and human behavior was sort of a frontier for computer science. So things have advanced a lot since that time, but we were making the argument back in 2008 that if we could instrument people and places, we may be able to have some good behavioral science affordances for doing real world data collection. And so some of the arguments at that time, and I think this still is kind of motivating some of the work, is if we can take the lab to people instead of bring people into the lab, we can reduce reactive arrangements. We can increase compliance. We're measuring behavior where it's occurring, so we have a better chance at ecological validity or variance explained across setting. We can measure multiple things simultaneously, which lets us look multimodally. We don't have to sort of hang all of our interpretation on one dependent variable. Wonderful advances in data visualization. So you can sort of get a gestalt idea about properties of the data that might be captured, say, densely or intensively over time, which is very helpful for hypothesis generation. To the extent that you know what signal you're looking for in the data and you can see it. We are now finding just-in-time feedback capabilities, so you can, in real time, prompt people to provide additional information, or to the extent that you have a intervention that you think would work just in the moment, just-in-time adaptive interventions are starting to show affordances. For kind of the more stat-oriented people, I'm a fan of intensive longitudinal designs. So this is where we have dense repeated measures. The individual serves as their own control. I've got Cattell's data box up here just to remind folks that most of behavioral science biostatistics is looking at the person and the measure dimension, but we're not looking at time. When we do look at time, we look at very few data points, and best thing you can do with few data points over time is draw straight lines. I think nothing in nature is a straight line. It has curvature. So the more that we have repeated measures, the more we can start to characterize patterns over time. Better, we can look at different variables within the same individual and how they're interacting over time. The extent to which you can capture proximal events and behavior closer to their occurrence gives us a better foundation for causal inference. So knowing what happened first may have produced an outcome later in a causal, not just correlational fashion. So I want to just give kind of a quick preamble, and then I have a brief video I want to show you all. So surveys suggest that as many as 2/3 of autistic individuals engage in aggressive behavior. And so we're really talking about aggression to other people, self-injury, tantrums, property destruction, and to some degree, elopement. It's one of the primary reasons that these families are referred to behavioral health care services. It's the thing that is of most concern to the parents. Aggression presents imminent safety risks to the individual who engages and others in the environment. We know that families report aggression increases their stress, isolation, and financial burden. It decreases available support options. They're repeatedly making 911 calls, emergency room visits, and when things get real bad, psychiatric inpatient settings to help manage aggression. But we have to remember that all of these services are meant for acute, not chronic care, and they're not available to everybody, and they're very costly. We also know from the literature that professional support staff report.
Matthew, your slides are black for me. I don't know if that's too
Yeah, that's because I just want you to listen. Professional support staff report greater injuries, more insurance claims. There is higher turnover, and there is greater burnout when working with aggressive youth with autism relative to other DD without autism. And so you could imagine that this difficult situation collectively increases demoralization, and then could lead to morbidity and to mortality. And we know that aggression is especially impairing and refractory to intervention in the 30 to 40% of autistic youth who are non-speaking. Their inability to self-report distress can lead to behaviors that seem to occur without warning, sometimes long after any kind of observable trigger. So I have a video here. Allison Singer, so she's the founder and president of Autism Science Foundation. She's also the mother of Jody, and Jody engages in aggressive behavior. And so I invited Allison to talk a little bit about her experience with Jody and the potential utility of the work I'm going to share with you after.
Jody is 26 years old. She is diagnosed with profound autism. She is sweet, she is affectionate, she has the purest soul, and she has serious episodes of self-injury and aggression. 27% of people who are diagnosed autism spectrum disorder meet the clinical definition of profound autism. It's defined as people who have autism who also have IQ below 50, who are nonverbal or minimally verbal, and who require 24/7 supervision in order to maintain safety. The biggest issue that families of kids with profound autism describe is really the self-injurious and aggressive behavior. There's nothing harder than watching your child hurt him or herself. Children will bang their heads against the floor with such ferocity that they experience detached retinas. They scratch, they bite. Some of these behaviors make it impossible to go out and participate in community activities. So for that reason, a lot of families stay home. They become very socially isolated. Often before these incidents take place, there's no warning to parents. There's no outward sign that you can visibly see that something is going to happen. One incident that really sticks out in my mind is when Jody was 5 years old and her sister was 3 years old. I was driving our minivan. Jody wanted to go back home, but we had to stop and do an errand. So when she saw that the car was not proceeding in the route that she knew to be towards home, she managed to unbuckle herself and came at me, started hitting me and punching me and screaming. I sort of pushed her off me. She started going after her sister. It was the most dangerous situation I think I've ever been in my life with my 2 children in the car. It's hard for me as a mother when my child is hitting me, but it's worse when she hits my other daughter. especially when she's helpless, strapped in a car seat. So that's one I don't really love to think about too much, but that was. That's why the biosensor research that Matthew is doing is critical. If I had some warning that Jody was about to have an aggressive outburst, I could have pulled my car over. I would have tended to her. I would have made sure that we were all safe. If we had that additional tool, I think I would be a little bit more relaxed. I wouldn't feel like I had to know everything about every environment before I took her, because I would know if the invisible stress were starting, I would be able to intervene. Most of the research that's being done in autism right now is being done on individuals who are able to get themselves to universities to participate. This type of research can be done in their own community. It can be done in their school. It can be done in their home. It's a way to bring the research into the community as opposed to bringing people with autism to the university. These are not bad kids. They're not acting out because they're bad or they're mean. It's part of their autism. What the data from the biosensor allows an adult to do is to intervene compassionately. When someone intervenes, you're helping them to regain their control and be better able to participate in community activities. It really has huge potential to improve the lives of people with profound autism.
Okay. So traditionally, aggressive behavior in autism, and this is mostly, I think, coming from the behavior analytic tradition, has been conceptualized as escape, avoidance, opposition, defiance, and in some instances, forensic. So sort of taking pleasure in harming another person. An alternative conceptualization is that these behaviors are maladaptive attempts to express or modulate physiological arousal due to distress. And so thinking about this more in terms of homeostatic regulation or equilibrium, I mean, it could acquire the functionality of escape, avoid, opposition, or defiance, but I'm not sure I believe that that's their origin. That may be learned behavior, operant behavior over time, but it would begin with what I think is a more parsimonious explanation, which is fight or flight responses. And we have an emerging literature that is suggesting that there are several factors associated with emotion dysregulation in autism that singly or in combination could lead to aggressive behavior. So if you have limited emotional language or alexithymic, have a difficult time identifying an internal affective state and communicating it, if you have poor flexibility or cognitive rigidity, if you have low inhibition, if you have executive function problems, if you have poor problem solving and abstract reasoning, difficulty reading social and emotional cues from other people, have sensory sensitivities or integration issues, environmental stimulation, overwhelm or underwhelm, biological predispositions to have sort of higher proprioceptive or lower proprioceptive sensation, you can imagine that the world is a much less predictable place. And you may very well be responding to events in the environment differently than other people who are perceiving them. And certainly in the cognitive domain, things like rumination or uncertainty is going to reduce your feeling of control and could very well lead to hypervigilance. So the model that we are operating under is the assumption that aggressive behavior is associated with fight or flight responses. We know in typical youth that greater ability to regulate physiological arousal is associated with fewer behavior problems. We know that studies of disorders characterized by emotional and behavioral dysregulation, like bipolar disorder or antisocial behavior, report strong association between physiological responding and symptomology. We have prior research in autism that demonstrates that individuals may engage in aggression in an attempt to communicate or alleviate distress and or to increase or decrease physiological arousal to achieve autonomic equilibrium. But if these behaviors are punished, or their underlying function is not satisfied, physiological arousal can increase, exacerbating and perpetuating an escalating loop of distress, arousal, and aggression. So our key hypotheses and objectives, we were hypothesizing that physiological arousal precedes aggressive behavior. We're specifically looking at aggression to others, self-injury, and tantrums or meltdowns. And our objective is to test whether the proximal onset of aggressive behavior can be predicted from preceding physiological signals using biosensing and machine learning. So a little bit about the sample. This was recruited out of the Simons Foundation Autism Research Initiative, Autism Inpatient Collection. This began in 2013. It includes 7 psychiatric hospitals and clinics, where they have a goal to recruit 1,600 autistic youth with higher support needs, and share de-identified data, including genetic sequencing, with approved researchers. It's a high throughput, unique setting to efficiently collect large amounts of standardized data, and for our purposes, sort of better understand the understudied segment of the autism population. So while the data collection primarily focused on phenotypic and genetic data, we thought the inpatient setting was a good platform to identify mechanisms underlying emotional and behavioral symptoms to inform intervention. We can study aggressive behaviors in situ, and because of the safety of the inpatient setting and environmental control, we can collect information while not putting people at undue risk or harm. So we were able to recruit and enroll 86 participants. We generated complete data on 70. Of the 16 that did not complete the study, 8 were discharged before we could make observations, and 8 would not tolerate wearing the biosensor. But 70 were on unit long enough to do multiple assessments and complied with wearing the biosensor. The 70 participants with autism are between 9 and 15 years old. They were predominantly white males. More than half are minimally speaking or non-speaking and had IQ in the moderate to significantly below average range. And the length of hospital stays ranged from 8 to 201 days. It's kind of remarkable to think about it stay that long. The physiological data was coming from the E4. It's a commercially available biosensor from Hepatica, although they just sunset it. We can talk later about what to do about that situation. So this records blood volume pulse, with which you can derive heart rate and heart rate variability using photoplasmography. So those are optics that are they're shining on the top of the wrist. Sampling at 64 hertz. It records electrodermal activity, so galvanic skin response, or what some people have called emotional sweating, at 4 hertz. And those are the 2 electrodes at the bottom that go on the underside of the wrist. And then it gives us skin surface temperature through thermopile. That's that little square that's in the middle next to the optical arrays. And then it's got a 3-axis accelerometer in it. So it's looking at pitch, yaw, roll. You can say something about gesture positional relative to gravity, and that's recording at 32 hertz. So that's what the inpatients with autism are wearing during observation. In the settings that we were collecting data, we could not record video. So we created a custom mobile phone application that had operationally defined aggression to others, self-injury, and what we called emotion dysregulation. We generated operational definitions of these. We took YouTube videos as a place to start to sort of train against a master coder. And then for 20% of each individual's total corpus of data collection, we have a second observer, an RA in the unit, who is annotating alongside another RA. And so when they're watching, these are opportunistic. We were asking them to annotate naturally emitted behavior, not elicited behavior. So on average, you'll see we did about 4-hour observations at a time for each individual. Most of them are referred for these behaviors, so we have relatively high rates. but they're naturalistic. And so what they would be doing is while the inpatient with autism is wearing the sensor, that sensor is time synchronized to the clock in the mobile phone application. And so they're selecting a button which indicates the topography, and then they'll select it so for an onset, and then they select it again for an offset. So we were using these labels as our ground truth to be able to segment the physiological data. I'll say more about this in a second. We had over 80% inter-rater reliability across the 20% of the corpus. So we have comparability between the two raters, and we had a 2.5 second onset and a 2.5 second offset tolerance for an absolute disagreement of 5 seconds and still consider it to be an agreement. We can talk more about this later, whether we're talking about discrete events or bouts of behavior. Of our total data collection, we had 429 sessions. It totaled 497 hours of data with a median of 5 observation sessions lasting 4 hours each, or 20 hours of data per participant, wherein we see 619 aggressive episodes, 2,063 tantrums or meltdowns, and 3,983 self-injurious behaviors, for a total of 6,665 aggressive behaviors with concurrent biosensors or biosensing data available for machine learning. Just to set this up for a second, the question that we're going to ask is how much biosensor data from the recent past is required to make a prediction how far into the future, at what level of percent accuracy, that we can predict the onset and an offset of these challenging behaviors. So we used 3 different machine learning methods. We used logistic regression, which is really a statistical model used for binary classification tasks. It's calculating the probability of an instance belonging to a certain class. So in our case, that's aggression versus non-aggression. We also looked at support vector machines. That should be SVM, not SMV, which is finding kind of an optimal hyperplane that separates classes. So again, that's going to be aggression to non-aggression. And then in the multi-class, that's looking at aggression to other versus self-injury versus emotion dysregulation, separating those 3 out. And then we use neural networks. So they're capable of learning complex patterns and relationships in the data that are not so easily interpretable as SVM and logistic regression, but can be a more powerful pattern matching and differentiating model. So as you can imagine, with the amount of data that we've collected, most of the time they're not engaging in aggressive behavior relative to the times they are. So we balance the data. So you have equal times per participant when they're engaging in the behavior and when they're not. Then we use a 15-second sliding window to extract features from the biosensor time series that are preceding the target behavior. And then we're essentially looking at PDM is person-dependent models. So you're training on one individual session and you're testing on that same individual session later. We also have PM, which are population models. So now we're pooling everybody's data together and leaving one person out and shuffling through. And then we have LSO, which is leave a session out. And we have LIO, which is leave an individual out. Those were both ways that we could make sure that we're not overfitting the data. So you're selectively withholding information as a holdout so that from your 80% training of the data, when you test on the 20, it's never been seen before. And you can do that at the level of the individual or the level of the session number. So one thing I want everybody to see straight away is of these 3 different methods, AUROC is somewhat similar to sensitivity or specificity. So 0.5 would be chance. So anything above 0.5 is better than random. And if you kind of visualize a line of best fit, almost all of these classifiers are performing above about 0.7 and 0.80 if you take an average of it. And so this is both for the offset of the behavior and the onset of the behavior. We did additional analyses where we are looking at discrete behaviors. So one of the things that we notice is that population models are typically outperforming person-dependent models. We can talk more about that later, why that might be the case. We also see that we have similar performance predicting individual behaviors, so ED, SIB, aggression to other, versus if you combine all of those together and treat it as a single class. We're getting equal performance as a combined any aggression versus which discrete aggression we observed. We use the accelerometer data as a proxy for intensity. This is a hard thing for humans to get inter-rater on when they engage in these behaviors. So we could sort them through cluster analysis into low, middle, and high intensity. And you basically see a dose response predicting combined behavior class. So if we're missing them, we're missing the low intensity. We're doing a better job of predicting the middle and the high intensity behaviors. Our best performing classifier was a ridge regularized logistic regression. And this enabled the longest prediction time in the future was 3 minutes. And for SVM, we had an AUC of 0.85 with a pretty narrow confidence interval. It was 0.84 to 0.86. Logistic regression was 80% AUC with a confidence interval of 0.79 and 0.81. And then the neural nets were 78%. So 3 minutes prior to onset of the behavior, ridge regularized logistic regression was correctly predicting 8 out of 10 times when a behavior is going to occur before it happened. Now, this is all offline analysis, so keep in mind that it's real data, it's real world data, but we are analyzing this not in real time. And so we can do various experiments about how far back we go, feature enrichment of the model, and then hold out where we have a ground truth label. The classifier would predict if an instance of onset is there, and then we can look at the blinded behavioral record, and that's how we confirm that it was correct. We also looked at test-retest reliability or stability of that best performing classifier. Oftentimes we had over 20 sessions repeated for the same individual, and we had roughly 80% average test-retest reliability over time of the classifier across individuals. And then finally, for analysis, we use domain adaptation techniques. So you're starting with the general population model and then updating the model with person-dependent data as new sessions are acquired. And so panel A on the left, we found that we could get a median RFC improvement of 14% if we are issuing a prediction 1 minute before onset. And then for panel B on the right, this is now 3 minute issuing a prediction. If we start with the general classifier and update with person dependent, we get a 6% increase. And so if we take that base rate of 0.80 with the logistic regression, we're getting anywhere from 94 to 86%, depending on how much time you have preceding the behavioral onset. So we published this, it's just about 2 years now ago in JAMA Open Network. I was not tracking, I didn't even know what altmetric is. I'm putting this up not because I intend to gloat, but because these statistics about tracking the uptake of this manuscript confirmed for me that this is an issue that a lot of people in the world are dealing with and are looking for methods. It is suggested in the 2 years that it's been published that it's in the 98th percentile of all research outputs ever tracked. So of 29,826,959 publications, it's in the 98th percentile of viewing and citation. We disclosed in the supplement all of our methods. So every pre-processing step of the data, every uh, experimental configuration, all of the classification results for each of the different models, all of the different feature sets, all of the different time windows are in this as a supplement. Really wanting to share this information so others could try to reproduce the results. I was also able to get the Simons Foundation to host a de-identified data set. So it has the raw behavior labels and it has all the raw physiological time series. And basically inviting other scientists to reproduce our results. So we're not a unicorn. But then also a special call, people whether you're an autism researcher or not, there are folks in econometrics, in engineering, in physics, and applied math who do time to event data. These are time to event statistics. And so more advanced mathematical models for issuing predictions. I would love people to do better than us and share their results so we can try to get solutions better to families. I'm kind of wrapping up here now. So there's kind of three things that are going on since the time of that paper. First, we're using more advanced means of transfer learning and domain adaptation. So we're trying to individualize models with partial or completely unlabeled data. So how well can the classifier predict an event if it doesn't have behavioral labels to train it? We're also looking at hierarchical Markov modulated point processes to account for the non-stationarity in our signals and statistics. We're looking at a functional data analysis of the raw biosensor data to better understand which features within the physiological change seem to be explaining the most variance in issuing a prediction. And then we're doing feature importance weighting. So what combination of biosensor data is it shared or is it unique across different individuals? I have a current R1 that's in its last year with the Marcus Autism Center at Emory University. And there we're collecting the same biometric data during functional analysis of behavior. And so they're trying to determine whether individuals who engage in aggressive behavior to self, other, or property are doing so as a socially mediated or automatically maintained motivating operation. We had 20 individuals who participated in that study, and we have 700 hours of physiological data, and those sessions are video recorded. So I'm actually quite excited for us now to start looking at computer vision, multimodal fusion, and just more rigor around the context of when the onset and the offsets of the behaviors occur. And then in parallel on the side, I've been working out a platform to be able to stream data live off the device that can be read by a phone where any kind of behavioral annotations are occurring. You can federate those two forms of data, upload it to the cloud, run our classifiers in real time, and then issue text messages or risk alerts, aggression alerts back down in real time when the classifier thinks that it's crossed above chance threshold. And the idea would be that the individual themselves or caregivers or clinicians could monitor these alerts and then initiate just-in-time adaptive de-escalation or emotion regulation interventions before aggression occurs. The goal here would be to de-escalate, see if we can prevent these aggressions from occurring in the first place. If that is not possible, at least you're prepared, and could you better support or mitigate the harm that is associated with aggression? And even if that fails, may we learn something about the previous event related to the environment and physiology and behavior that helps us better anticipate and be prepared next time. A lot of what I have done thus far is assuming that we have somebody else in the environment who can provide that intervention, but I think there's some kind of interesting technical opportunities where, the classifier issuing a prediction is a if then that kind of a signal. So that's what triggers the text alert. But you could imagine that this could also change color, dim lights of a Philips Hue light bulb. This could have Siri or Alexa come online and record information from the environment, or to maybe provide some verbal instructions. My fantasy would be that systems like this are put in the hands of people like you, who are doing assessments, really know the individual, generate a kind of antecedent behavior consequent and then a subsequent behavior management plan. And that could train the parents that when you get this alert, these are the steps that you should engage in as time is getting closer to aggression onset. So I want to thank several people at Northeastern and folks at the Marcus Autism Center, and then various funders of this research. It's been Nancy Larry Marks Family Foundation, the Simons Foundation, National Institute on Deafness and Other Communication Disorders, National Cancer Institute, National Library of Medicine, and the National Science Foundation and Department of Defense. And then for those who like tech, like data, are training students, clinicians who have an aptitude for technology, or technology people who have an interest in health sciences. We have a PhD program we started about 8 years ago at Northeastern in personal health informatics, and we're really interested in trying to train the future workforce who are as conversant in computational methods as they are in psychological and behavioral methods. So with that, I will end and welcome any questions or comments.
Thank you, Matthew. Really, really appreciate it. Rebecca, I see that you turned your camera on, so I didn't know if that indicated through my very good use of nonverbals, if that is indicating a question.
Yes. Matthew, it's always great to hear you present. I have some questions about the new technology that you're thinking about in terms of the smartphone notifications. Are you still thinking the Empatica would be the device for that, or is there a different device that will be used to measure? And will it still need electrodes?
Right, great question. So many of you probably already know this who have been using the E4. Empatica sunset it with very little notice to a lot of people. They've converted people over to the Embrace Plus. The problem is, and so no, I don't use it anymore, but the problem is, so the E4 had Bluetooth streaming the data live off device, and then it had a software development kit and an application programming interface that would let you basically ingest it into any other receiver and then do analysis on that data. The Embrace Plus does not have an SDK, it does not have an API. It does have a Bluetooth radio, but they have it turned off. They basically pivoted to that device because they're working with large pharmaceutical companies doing multi-site randomized clinical control trials, and they don't really want to support individual researchers or developers. So this is forcing us to now start looking at other sensors, and this is another active, we're doing a benchmarking study on my lab right now of I think we have 8 different devices that are commercially available, and all of which that have a Bluetooth radio and API and an SDK, and we're comparing them benchmark against BioPack to a suite of, this is neurotypical, these are undergrads, but just trying to get a sense of signal quality. One of the issues that we have is we need access to the raw data, and a lot of the commercially available devices don't give you access to raw data. They give you moving averages, or they give you some index that they made up. And so this is a bit of a limitation. I have to think forward thinking somewhat. Any wrist-worn device can be taken off and batteries die. So there are people that are working in material sciences and electronics, like temporary tattoos, adhesives, subcutaneous, ingestibles. I don't know about the subcutaneous and ingestibles. I don't know how I feel about that quite yet. But the longer term monitoring for temporary electronics could be a good eventual solution to this. But we're going to put them through all their paces. So there's the benchmarking study that's going to tell me which ones are kind of performing best to our reference. And then I'd like to deploy these with families of individuals with autism, use these devices with our classifiers and see if they perform similarly or not to what we saw with the E4.
Thank you for that. Rachel posted very interesting in chat. I didn't know, Rachel, are you able to, yeah, could you ask that question out loud? Because And just to provide some context, I'm involved in a couple studies where the inclusion of an ethics person is becoming much more prominent. So yeah, you raised some interesting questions there, and especially when Matthew talked about ingestibles and like tagging people, I think that even like raises this question even more. So please, yeah, ask your question out loud.
Sure, sure. And I kind of put it in the chat too because I'm trying to be sensitive to multimodality because I had a lot of thoughts and I'm like, somebody's going to need to look at my words at the same time. Um, I think more what I'm getting at is I think the science is amazing and I see a lot of beautiful takeoff. There's so many great possibilities, but one of the pieces that I think we often see is the misuse of a lot of the science that we do across the board. Um, and just thinking about like, are you building in plans potentially for future research that can have some applied emphasis, meaning that you could provide guidance for the appropriate and ethical use of the technology. And I say this as someone who, like, I both do diagnostics as well as supervise a program for service delivery. And a lot of what we're always doing is trying to help people be more effective in ethical cares and really pay attention in a society where people are used to getting information automated for them. And so even things like motivators from back in the day for vibrating attention, those have been misused too. And so I just am curious if there's thoughts about how we can help people use this in the right and positive way that it's intended, or if you wanted to speak a little to that.
Yeah, awesome that you're thinking of those things. So I will say, since that paper came out, I have had tech companies, like people saying, let's make this a product and get it out there quick. And I say, oh no, it is not ready for that yet. So let's just remind ourselves for a second that this is results produced by highly trained clinical staff and research assistants that are monitoring the wear, the handling of the data, the um, um, alerts that are being issued. This is not operated in a home classroom or a clinic setting where you don't have that high level of ground truth and annotation. Even at 80% in balanced data, 20% of the time, it's going to issue a false positive or false negative. And that's not actually as good as it is because the data is imbalanced. So it's probably a higher false positive, false negative rate. If a individual acting on the alert has overconfidence in the system and thinks that it is not, it's not giving you at the time, at this moment, it's not giving you a rolling probability of the event. It's just saying that sometime in the next 3 minutes, this can happen. Well, if they give a false belief that it's not issuing an alert, therefore nothing's happening, therefore, like, I can go upstairs and leave the front door open. That is not at all, you can't have that much certainty. These are all probabilistic. The other thing is we haven't done, I mean, we're doing them now, and they're important, like good user interface, good user experience with the person who's going to receive the alert. Time in the past and time in the future and probability, like that's hard enough for us all as scientists. That's very hard for your sort of, I mean, COVID showed us this, right? Like people don't really understand what this means. So what's the right interface to give to people that is actionable in the amount of time that you could actually engage in a preemptive intervention? I don't think we've really tested yet. We also don't know how long it's going to take for someone to receive the alert, receive their clinician guided, these are intervention steps you should take. How much time is left before the behavior occurs for that intervention to be effective? Also unknown, and I would like to learn those things too. Did this answer all your questions, or is there one more embedded in there? I mean, there's some ethics about this too. Like, do you feel like the risk of getting it wrong outweighs the risk of getting it right? Is there more value on a false positive or a false negative? Most of the clinical staff and parents will say, I'd rather you tell me it's going to happen and it doesn't than not tell me it's going to happen when it does. And I think the truest test we're going to have to do next, once the system can operate in real time, would be kind of an RCT where you push notification or you suppress notification and just see if giving early alert and then ask that person to confirm whether the behavior happened or not. There's two things. One, does raising consciousness, is that an intervention in and of itself with a measurable impact? And then what's true positive, true negative rate, not an estimated one.
Yeah, that's perfect. That's actually this part that I'm hoping that does happen in the future. And I think the way that you're iterating the use and the limitations is really helpful because I think so many people who are trying to represent science in an accurate way in today's society are going back to the exact components as they're specified in articles to try to get the information right. And I hope that other people don't try to take what you're doing and turn it into a marketable concept before your science is saying it's safe to do so. But thank you so much for doing that and for answering that question.
Yeah, awesome. I mean, it's partly why I'm doing exactly what my university asked me not to do. I'm giving everything away. I'm disclosing everything. I do not want this to be held by one person. It's too hard of a problem and it's got too much of a potential impact, but it's got to be done right. I'm so cognizant of the fact that these families have years and years and years of people saying, if you just do this, it'll make it better, and it doesn't. And you're going to cause learned helplessness and people are going to give up. There are other issues too. I was just on sabbatical and spending time with somebody in the University of Salzburg who studies PTSD and trauma-related responses. And he said, a lot of these families probably have PTSD from their children's behavior. You're going to alert them that something's going to happen. You may be triggering them. You have to be prepared to have a primary intervention for them before you can expect them to be able to intervene with their child. And of course, that's so obvious once you say it, but was not something we were thinking about when we were developing the system in the first place. I think it's going to be very important to do user studies with people with lived experience and really understand who it works for, when, under what circumstances. I think before anything should be, any kind of commercial claims are made about it.
Matthew, again, I appreciate the thoughtfulness that you do your research and approach this. I think I had this dream that wouldn't it be cool to put that wearable on my boss, and when I'm having a discussion, I can see, oh my God, I need to back down because they're getting too upset. But real quick, I know Vincent, you just put your camera on. Can you real quick answer in chat that was said that did sex or age or any other kind of categorical even IQ, did that increase or decrease the accuracy of it? And then Vincent, you can answer your question.
No, we didn't see any observable differences by age or sex or even type of behavior. What we did see, I didn't present it today. We published it in Autism Research, I think 3 years ago. Oh shoot, I'm blanking on the first author's name. It's Carla Mazevsky's previous postdoc. We were looking not at the physiological data, but we were just looking at the behavioral event data and doing recurrence quantization analysis. So one thing we do see is that some individuals are primarily engaging just in self-injury, just in aggression to others, just in tantrums. Some other individuals are engaging in multiple of those behaviors, and then there are different time courses. So there are some where they seem to go right to aggression to another person versus others who have observable emotion dysregulation that progresses to SIB, that then progresses to aggression to other people. And so it is kind of interesting to think about individual differences. I know there's a literature in sort of hot aggression, cold aggression, whether these are building up or these are more kind of like instantaneous. That is probably operating in our data set. I mean, while this is a ton of data for behavioral science, for machine learning studies and these kinds of big questions, this is not a very big sample. So we definitely need more observations from more diverse individuals before I think we could really answer those questions. But please, Vincent, if you have a question.
Yeah, thanks a lot. So I was just curious about your expectation in terms of getting into platforms that can get into families' hands. I know you said you're playing with some, and especially ones that are more commercially available, but still give you the right sensors to get false positives out, like like emotional valence and stuff like that are very important to make sure we have the right detection, right?
Yes.
And also one more thing is the intervention of the family could also be accommodating enough that it's not, yeah, I can see when they shouldn't be leaving doors open and stuff like that, but sometimes just a redirection is good enough.
Mm-hmm.
But
Yeah.
anyway, can you
Good
comment
comments.
on
No, you're like a crowd plant for me because these are things I like to say, but are not in the presentation. So we're looking at like Apple Watch, Garmin, Fitbit, Polar. These are all, there are others that have lower sampling rates. And Sylvie, I'm sorry I missed you online. There's so many people that I know and I haven't seen for a long time that are on this call. Audrey and Rebecca and Elena and that's nice. Hi Sylvie. Natasha just graduated. Did she tell you? She defended her dissertation successfully.
We have about 30 seconds.
Okay, sorry. Okay, so Vincent, so that's one thing. Another thing is that obviously something is changing further upstream than the physiological change before the behavior. So my hope would be that if you can provide alert above chance, that if family would continue to use a system like this because it has some utility, and then we can start to layer on additional data collection or requests. So tell me about the perceived affect at the time that I issued the alert, or what was their previous night's sleep, or has there been a med change, or is today a different type of day than their typical routine? That may help us start to personalize the classifier because we can incorporate additional information. It may also help us better understand where to intervene. I mean, we're intervening in the moment to try to prevent a crisis, but that intervention might actually include something that's much more distal in the past that is being intervened upon that would produce the outcome for the day. This is so what I know is the more data we get and the more sessions for an individual, the better the classifiers get. So I theoretically think if we layer on additional sources of data at different timescales, it should just improve, and that helps us better personalize to say what to do. And then obviously we need to know, how did the intervention go? So I gave you the alert. Your behavior management plan says this is how you should have intervened. Did it work or not? And then we need to incorporate that knowledge back into the classifier, the guidance that's provided. My last thing I'm going to say, Stephen, I promise. As we have more and more users, I would hope that we can start to data mine what are common precursors or triggers, what are common or more efficacious interventions given the properties of the individual, and we could issue more policy-oriented interventions for it's not just a trial and error every time that someone gets the system. But I want all of that worked out before I ask families to spend any money or invest any hope in a system like this. I think this has great translational commercial potential, but I want the evidence first. I don't want to try to do research after it's already out there and people are using it in ways that it's not intended.
Matthew, thank you so much for coming through as I knew you would. You're talking to a group of people who would love to in any way collaborate, help. We all recognize and appreciate the impact and importance of your work, and the rigor by which you go about your research is also respected in a big way.
Thank you.
Wanted to wish everybody happy holidays and safe holidays. And again, thank you, Matthew. And we'll see everyone back here in January, hopefully with Jimmy and Apartments. So
any additional questions, please email me. There's many friends I'd like to catch up with. So I welcome you to be in touch. Thank you for having me, and happy holidays.
Thanks all.
Bye.